when I got into like bodybuilding as a whole, it was very common. I still think it's very common today for people to be like, yeah, just grab that weekly check-in, just take your weight that day. I don't want you to get obsessive with the scale. And like, I understand if the scale is like a trigger point for you, I get not stepping on it. Full transparency, like it was a trigger point for me for most of my life. Like, I mean, that would like literally dictate how I felt about my body. Most days, like early on, I was not in a good place with the scale. And really, I think when that changed, it was when I was like, you know what, I'm going to take my scale weight every single day. I'm going to normalize these fluctuations. I'm going to see that, like, frankly, these fluctuations happen whether I'm on track or not. Like, they are a very normal part of this process. And there are factors that obviously they can't be quantified to the extent that I'd like them to be, because even if changing like no variables, repeating the exact same day with the exact same intake, no shifts in like fluid and sleep and recovery, like, just to the best of my ability, still these fluctuations, like we're talking like a 3-pound difference between my low and my high every week. That's the norm. And if you don't have a way to, I would really say like audit whether that scale weight reading is 100% accurate, that is where you need to start, because that's going to make gaining weight much more mentally fatiguing. I would say, particularly if you're someone who's always struggled with it. If it's something that out the gate, like you're just very intimidated to get started with, even men, like that's something that I find a lot of people struggle with. I'm fortunate that a lot of people do come to me and they're like, hey, let me lay it out on the table. This is something that's very hard for me to do. This is something that's very hard for me to admit. But really, like, the fact of the matter is you have to assess why you're even making this decision to build. And I think for a lot of people, I think they kind of get lost in the idea of, okay, in order to have the physique that I want to have, in order to get to that finish line, the only approach I need to take is being in a deficit, creating a deficit, being very tight, being very trim, being restricted. Whereas what we see is that a lot of times people will get down to that body fat goal. They will get down to their leanest physique. What do you know? They're like, oh, I didn't have as much muscle as I nearly thought. Actually, in order to look the way I want to look, I'm going to have more muscle. I'm going to need more density, more size. I'm going to need to be stronger. And this was a challenge for me for majority of my time in bodybuilding. It really became it became apparent at a certain point, because I was like, okay, what is the opportunity cost? The opportunity cost here. I'm having to compensate so much in so many ways in order to bring the physique that I need to bring, like the minimum visibility I need for my tie-ins. I'm having to get so lean in other areas because I do lack the balance. I don't have the muscularity. So in turn, like I'm doing this thing, I'm working against my body. Whereas if I just put on more muscle, not only does it solve the problem of not having enough muscle, but it also makes it to where I'm not having to compensate with conditioning. I'm not having to get nearly as lean, like objectively to a lower body fat percentage for where I need to go. I'm also not having to compensate with posing. All of these things, these are benefits. And you take the stage away, okay? So for the non-competitor, it's like, I can tell you, there's a lot of people that in their mind, it's like, okay, they're using one metric, one body part to determine, okay, like I want to achieve this. I want to achieve no cellulite on the back of my legs or whatever, around my glutes. Okay, I want to do that. But if you don't have enough glute, and this isn't just limited to the competitor. I mean, like, you look at the non-competitor, and this, honestly, this is the hardest part, is moving in the opposite direction that you've always moved thus far. You've always moved in the direction of restricting food. You've always moved towards having a tighter physique. So to actually hit pause on that and be like, okay, we're going to actively move in the other direction, and we're going to do this for an extended period of time. It's not going to be just 8 weeks or 6 weeks. Some people really have this idea, okay, we're going to build for 6 weeks and we're just going to be good. It's like, no, this is going to take a long time. And this is where most people stop. This is where most people pause and they're like, you know what, I don't want to do this. I'm not ready to do this, because I mean, it makes sense. Like, I get it. It's hard. It's hard to wake up every day and put forth the same amount of effort into something that, frankly, seemingly, like, both intrinsically and externally, like you're like, this is moving me further away from my goals. It's hard, and hard feels shitty. But this is where most people, they tap out. They're like, okay, I'm going to continue to compete. And I just, I like being lean. And I feel like that thought process, that concept of like, okay, well, I just like sitting leaner year round. It's a bit of an excuse if you are someone who's scared, if you're someone who's nervous, because ultimately what you're doing is you're deciding that, like, okay, I get to stay in this realm of comfortability. I get to stay in a place where I'm controlling the outcome. I'm controlling the outcome of not getting past a certain body fat percentage, not getting to a certain weight on the scale. It's familiar, and I get it. It comes from, for most people, I think it comes from a place of being fearful that they're not going to be able to pull back, that eventually it's going to be misconstrued. It's going to be, even internally, they're going to feel as if they are being lazy, as if they're not working as hard. Whereas, like, when you're dieting and you see the scale weight like change, when you see that drop, it's super motivating. It's a big ask to tell someone that, like, hey, like, not only are you going to have to forego that, you're going to have to forego that motivation, you're also going to have to strive for new numbers on the scale that, frankly, like, maybe you've never seen. Maybe if you've been restricted your entire life, maybe if you've always sat very comfortably, you might find that, like, no, it's going to take several points past what your highest weigh-in has been. I mean, yes, the goal is that we do this in a way that's conducive with more muscle than body fat, but some body fat, it's going to accrue.